welcome to Literary Hype. I am Stephanie, your literary hype woman, back with another author conversation, and this time I'm featuring a debut author. I just love featuring debut authors because it's so much fun to find a new writer that you like and then to be able to share them with your friends. That is why Bookstagram and Booktube and Book Talk exist, is because we love to share about authors that we discover. So this author is Becky Chalsen. She's a film and TV exec during the day, and then she wrote Kismet during the pandemic, and it's a fun summer read with some shenanigans in there. Definitely some shenanigans. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Becky Chalsen. Welcome to Literary Hype.
Thank you.
How are you feeling leading up to the debut of your first book?
Oh, yes, I'm good. I'm like so excited and nervous at the same time. And yeah, just trying to like stay grateful and less stressed, if that makes sense.
Have you reached out to any other authors for like advice on debuting and touring? You're going on a book tour as well.
Yes, it's been Sarah Gio is just like such a lovely mentor of mine, and she has just such sweet advice about, just like staying grounded, and but that's been so fun. And then I have made a lot of like other debut friends, which has been really sweet. And Kat Shook, whose book, if we're being honest, also her debut also comes out on the 18th. And so we have sort of become like twin authors in a way. Like we're in kind of constant communication about the road, which has just been wild.
I love that the writing community it's just brings you together in such great and powerful ways. Have you gotten any great advice or just on the writing craft along the journey?
Yeah, it's so funny. That's such a great question. I think I've gotten good advice about like trying to stay focused on like what's next, even while you're promoting your book. Like it's so hard because you're sort of always very ahead of what you're working on. It feels so ahead of like what you're promoting just by the nature of the book. And so I wrote my second book, which was so helpful. Like that was probably the best advice I got, was like try and write your second book before your first book comes out, because once you start to see like it sort of is their first book, it's so like isolating in a nice way sometimes, where you can really take swings and not really think about like future readers. And then once it sort of makes its way, it's just harder sometimes to ignore, I think, like the chatter or like criticism. And so that I found to be very helpful, was just this idea of like try and stay focused as much as you can on your own success and like your own process, instead of like going online and like don't look at Goodreads. It's like, got it. Listening to all the advice I can get, truly.
Goodreads is a minefield for but you do have some fun authors on your Goodreads giving you 5 fairness.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, it's just so sweet. Yeah, the author community is insane. People are so kind. That's been the best. And like I'm still so like in awe. Like I'm such a book nerd and like always came up in publishing and reading. And the fact, like the second that like authors would follow me back on Instagram, I was like, oh my God. So to get starstruck still, like it's sort of amazing. Yeah, so it's been wonderful just like to get to know them and to like walk into bookstores and be like, oh, these are my friends. What am I saying? How lucky am I? It's wild.
Oh yes, what is my life?
Yeah, exactly.
So your first book is Kismet. Can you introduce us to the story?
So Kismet, it takes place in the town Kismet, Fire Island, which is just an amazing beach town that my husband has grown up going to, and I've grown up going with him. And it follows these twin sisters on Amy attending her twin sister Joe's wedding. And it's all over the course of a week of the wedding lead up, and drama ensues. Amy sort of shows up to Kismet already sort of reeling from a loss that she's experienced. And so she's already sort of filled with just like doubt of like this big sort of like misstep in her plan. And then she sees she arrives with her high school sweetheart turned husband. I also am high school sweetheart turned husband. And then she sees like the one other guy that she ever really had feelings for is there as sort of like the mysterious best man. Her sister has this like whirlwind wedding, and so they haven't had a lot of time to meet the groom, let alone the groom's best friend. And so when it turns out to be sort of that one person that she hoped she'd never see again because he's sort of the path not taken. And so it just throws everything into a tailspin of anxiety and drama and secrets and all the fun sort of like love triangle elements that I love reading in books, but also about sisterhood in a way to kind of find their way back to each other at its like core. But yeah, on like Fire Island, which is such a fun town. Where are you from? Have you ever been to Fire Island or
I've never even heard of Fire Island before reading this book.
It's so
I'm
good.
in the middle of nowhere. Well, I guess not the middle of nowhere now. I grew up in the middle of nowhere. Now I'm in St. Louis.
Oh, I love St. Louis. My sister went to WashU, one of my sisters. And so we love going to St. Louis. But yeah, so the Fire Island, it's close to the Hamptons. If you've heard of the Hamptons, it's like sort of like a louder, like more posh, like cousin. And Fire Island is just this tiny island right off the coast of Long Island. And you can only get there by taking a ferry. And so when you're there, it feels like you're sort of transported. Like it's just, there's my father-in-law always, like the first thing he does when he gets on the ferry is like take off his watch and you're like on Fire Island time. And it just like time doesn't exist. And like they sleep, somehow we like stay up really late. You sleep in really late, you have a full day at the beach, and then you still have a whole night. Like the hours don't make sense. Like it's sort of magical. And so I've always wanted to write something that's like set in there because it's just this like special town. Yeah, and it just has this like quality to it that, yeah, because there's no cars. So, you know, there's sort of this like the flip side of that coin is like there's really no rules and there's like firefighters, but I don't think there's like a small police department. And so the kids are just sort of like walking around, and Zach, my husband, grew up going there, and there's all these stories. Like they would just spend days like walking the length of the town, which is like 5 blocks, like getting ice cream, riding their bikes around, getting into like innocent childhood trouble. And then the parents like on the beach, and there's just a level of safety because you're not really worried about, like you can't go too far. And so, and everybody is sort of friends with each other and they grow up together, and it's sort of like your camp friends like the whole summer long. And yeah, it's just been amazing. You have to come with me this summer.
Okay, I'm down. Twist my leg. I mean, I'm always down for travel. It's always a good time.
Yeah, right? It's so fun. I love it.
Yeah. So, and how does that kind of like campy, kind of different time vibe play into your story?
I think there's sort of that fun. It was a fun to balance. And my editor, Cassidy at Dutton, really helped me with this too, like balancing the sort of drama at the forefront of Amy being in this place that usually represents like summer happiness. And I love too, there's a moment that Amy and Jo, the twin sisters, both are sort of like, we're never used to being sad here. Like this is a place that always was like family memories. But it's as you get older, I just turned 30 in December. And I sort of feel this way too, that sometimes you're like, oh, no, like you revisit these childhood traditions and you have like adult stressors with you. And so even, you know, on Christmas, like you're thinking about like work stuff and you're like, oh no, like this is supposed to be like a safe place, but like adult anxiety sort of encroaches in. And so they're dealing with that. And I think the whole town represents it for them in this book, where they're dealing with the wedding anxieties, and Jo isn't sure if her in-laws are like happy to be there. Like they're clearly upset about something and she thinks it's about them. And so, and Amy is just dealing with like, did I make the right choice in my marriage? And should I have been with this guy Emmett instead? And like all of this other chaos. But in the background, there's like parties and beach bonfires, and there's a volleyball game, and there's so much fun. There's a parade every year in July 4th weekend. There's always this crazy parade. And so I wrote it in the book because it's one of my favorite days of summer. And Zach has these crazy stories about as a kid, like decorating wagons and being like paraded, and there's a band, and it's so fun. And so you look around and all these people are smiling and having the best time and, you know, soaking in the sun, but our characters are sort of reeling. And I love that dichotomy of how are you supposed to feel happy all the time, like in a place that's supposed to be, you know, quote unquote, happy on vacation. And so I thought there was something fun to be had about just comparing, you know, stress, but also like summer sunshine. And so I think people will find some fun. And then the best is like the cousins who are just like carefree. And so that was what Cassidy really helped me with too, is trying to strike that balance of Mary and Bobby are Amy and Jo's cousins who come in for the weekend, and they're just having the time of their life because they're like, I took vacation days for this. Let's like lean in.
And so one of the fun things about your characters is they also share names with your sisters.
Yeah.
You are quadruplet. Like
Yes.
that alone is pretty cool. And then too, so how do your sisters feel about have characters that share names with them?
So they're very excited. It's so I'm a quadruplet, all four girls. We have one older brother whose name is Sam. All of the names in the book are named after people that for the most part, after people that I know and love. Because I figured, like, I'm writing a book, I might as well like pay homage to my friends and family. And so Joe is named after my sister Joanna, and then Amy. So this is the backstory. Buckle in. My parents, when they were told they were having quadruplets, they thought it was going to be 2 boys and 2 girls. And so they got to the hospital, and my mom was in labor, and all of a sudden it was 4 girls, and I'm the third born. And so my parents hate this story, but the first thing I ever heard was like, they pulled Joanna out, girl. And they pull up me, and it's like, what the hell? It's another girl. It's like, welcome, Becky. And I feel like that I've like sort of taken that in. Just this, like, yeah, so funny. But anyway, my parents only had 2 girls' names picked out. They always wanted to name a girl Rebecca after Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farms, which is my mom's favorite book growing up. And they always wanted Margaret as like a family name. And so my mom is like post-labor, like recovering, and my dad completes the rest of the names with Elizabeth and Joanna. And months later, they realized that they unintentionally named 3 out of the 4 of us the Little Women sisters. And so Joanna's Joe, Margaret's Meg, Elizabeth's Beth, but I'm Rebecca instead of Amy. And I've my whole life been like so upset about this because I've never enjoyed the name Rebecca. I don't feel like I'm a Becky. I don't feel like I'm a Becca. I don't really connect to Rebecca. And so it's always in my mom's heart because all she wanted was to have a daughter and name her Rebecca. And instead, I've always been like, I should have been Amy. And so when I started writing Kismet, I was like, the main character is named Amy, who I should have been, my proxy. But Joanna read it first, actually, because she loves these types of books, and she loved it. But she also was like, it's kind of hard to read. Like, is it me? Like, is it not me? And the twist, of course, is that like both twin characters in my book are more like me than they are any of my sisters, because my sister, Joe has sort of my like writing passion, and Amy has more of my like type A, not quite go with flow. But Maggie and Lizzie now are like, where's my book? And so in the second book, the characters will be named Maggie and Liz in their honor. I have to complete it somehow.
I mean, it's a fun little shout out. It's like some people are like, ooh, don't name a character after me because don't want it connected.
Yes.
Like, characters do different things than the real people. So there's that whole like connection of
exactly.
Do I want it? Do I not?
So funny. Bobby, the cousins Bobby and Mary. Bobby is my sister Lizzie's fiance who went to Wash U. And he is so excited because we've known him for so long, and he's just the best. And then Mary is our only other, our high school friend group was like my sisters and then like a few other girls. And Mary is like, she lives around the corner from me in Brooklyn still, and is sort of our like bonus sister. And so she's the other cousin, but she doesn't know. She's the only one I haven't told yet that she's in it. And so when she reads it, I think she's going to be very excited. So sweet.
We're getting the scoop here.
Yes, exactly. I just gave her a copy of the book yesterday, so I'm waiting for her to like text me like, oh my God, Mary. Hopefully
there are a lot of kind of autobiographical details in this, like going to Penn and marrying, like your main character Amy is married to her childhood sweetheart that she's known since kindergarten, which is a similar story for you. What was it like for you to kind of include those little Easter eggs along the way?
Yes, it was so much fun. it was so much fun sort of testing myself of like basically coming to any deciding moment and being like, where do I pull from? And is it autobiographical or is it like escapist and sort of like a dream? And so there's a lot of aspirational elements of, Amy and Ben are homeowners. Like, I'm not a homeowner, but the dog that they had is named after like my friend's dog, Rocky. Or even like, there's like an ex-boyfriend moment of Zach having like shoved beer bottles in the mailbox. And like my sister's boyfriend did that in high school to us. And so I was like, fuck this guy. I'm like, we'll never forget that. And so I had to just add a little color, but then, there's a lot of other sort of like Emmett's whole career is just like escapism, like wish fulfillment almost. And I don't know anybody actually like that, but it was fun to sort of give little inside jokes. I think too, because I had no clue that this book would become a book. Like I hoped it, of course, but I wrote it during COVID. I don't have much, I've always worked in like book to film development, but I don't have much writing experience. I've always loved reading, and I always loved the art of character, and working in development is so, really rolling your sleeves up and talking about story, and especially in like books to film, which I've always worked in. But I never really thought I'd write. My older brother is a screenwriter, and he was always the writer. And he just had this like way about him that I was like, Sam's a writer, and like I'll do development. And then in COVID, my weekends freed up because, of course, the lockdown. And then my husband was getting his MBA at Columbia, but just the Saturday program. And it was remote. It started May 2020. And from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., he was on Zoom on his computer in our small apartment that his whole background, it's not this apartment, his background was our whole apartment. So I couldn't even like move around. And I was like, I took 11 minutes of his first statistics class with him because I was like, maybe I'll get my MBA. And then I was like, this is so boring. I can't do this. I think I'll write a book. And so on Saturdays, we would both wake up early, and I would sit next to him and I would just write. And it was so much fun and a whole new muscle that I had never worked before. And I loved it. But I sort of knew, like, I don't know if anyone else will ever read this. I might as well like make it fun. And so as I was writing, and I think that's what helped me write it and really finish it, was that I really treated it as like a hobby. And it was sort of, it was the way I spend my weekends. I tell people too, like I actually first started writing a thriller that was like so different, because I've always like loved cults. And I was like, maybe I'll write a thriller. And then I'd work Monday to Friday and have like, a pretty intense job. And then on Saturdays, I would be in this thriller. And I was like, this is depressing. Like, I don't want to write. I don't think I could. And I love people. And even I'm very close friends now with Ethan Joella, who wrote A Little Hope and A Quiet Life. And he's so amazing. The happiest guy you've ever met. His books are gorgeous, but I cry every page I'm reading it. And I was like, how do you not cry while you're writing it? Like, I felt like I needed to write a book that had, in order to actually like execute the book, like a level of fun and sort of like, the beach read element of it, which I love. And so I think by treating it as just an opportunity to sort of enjoy my time that was so stressful and so uncertain, and COVID pandemic, it was really all summer 2020. My trick was sort of just, having a fun time with it. Which was sort of wonderful. And I think that's what helped. And now it's sort of, everything has just been a blessing of just, wow, like, let's see. And I'm so privileged that I had worked at WME, where another fun fact, my agent, Sabrina, we were interns together going into our senior year of college at WME New York. She was in the books department. I was in the theater department. We both moved to LA after graduation and worked at WME in the mailroom in LA. She was in books. I was in books to film. And then we both moved to New York, and we worked for the same agent, Jennifer Rudolph Walsh, who like ran the New York office. She's amazing. Sabrina and I were co-assistants, which meant we were in constant communication. A year of my life, craziness. It was so fun, but so wild. And then I left work at a production company, and Sabrina stayed to be an agent. And so when I texted her in 2020, like that summer, saying, I think I'm going to write a book, she was like, of course, send it to me. It's like, great. And so I also sort of knew, such luck and privilege. And I sort of think of it as like, if you can survive like your WME, like agency mailroom experience, it's because you meet these relationships that grow with you as in your career. And so I always knew I just had to finish a draft, and then I can send it to Sabrina and like see what she thinks. And the best was when I finished the draft by the end of 2020. It took me like 6 months of Saturdays, and I sent it to Sabrina over New Year's. And like the first day of January, she was like, oh my God, like, I think we can sell it. Like, okay, and then I read it again. I was like, am I okay with this? And I was like, no, yeah, I think this would be a really a fun thing to try and see if we can do. And now the fact that it comes out in like 15 days is actually insane. That's my whole story.
I mean, it's a good story. Publishing is wild.
Wild. Yeah, wild. And like, everybody has such incredible stories and heartbreaking stories, and there's really no one way to do it. And so I'm so grateful that I sort of knew Sabrina. And then what's been the most fun too is like watching her grow as an agent. Like, we were interns together, and then, and you see her sort of like do her thing, and it's like, oh my God, like, yeah, you're not just my friend, like, you are great at like what you do. And it's fun to sort of be supportive together in that way, which it was so unexpected. But that's like the best part about in this industry of between publishing and entertainment too, of like, you really can choose who you work with and grow together. And so it's really fun to be able to find these people who I met 10 years ago and be like, oh, like you're writing still, like maybe we can work together. Or yeah, which is sort of, I think, different if I had been in, accounting, or I had wanted to be a lawyer. I took the LSATs and I did not do well on the LSATs. And then I was going to go work in the mailroom for $10 an hour and deliver mail. But it all worked out, it's so crazy.
It definitely is. So since we both have day jobs in TV,
Yeah.
what did you learn, especially you with book to film development? What did you learn through that job that kind of helped you while crafting your novel?
Such a good question. There's a few answers. Sorry. I think speed for sure is sort of, and I think the flip side of the speed element is the collaborative nature that by definition makes you less precious, and the way that we've always worked in my company, we love getting in there and giving notes and like working with our writers and figuring out the best way to tell the story. But when you see the process, like television, film, even theater, like the rounds and rounds of notes from producers, the studio, the network, and you can't sort of cling to anything because you have to really think about like what's best for the project and be open to input from teammates. And so I think because of that, for the book has actually been so funny because I've sort of been waiting for I mean, even in the edits, and my editor is so brilliant, but I was like, get in there, like do a full red note, like are you sure this word's good? Like I sort of was like almost expecting it. Whereas publishing is definitely more like, like it's up to you. Like you can do what you want with it. And you're like, really? Like, no one's going to come in and do a page on rewrite. Like it happens too much in television. And so it was funny to sort of see that difference. But I think working in film and TV first helped me also like complete the draft, I'd say, like not just the time element, but in this book and in the second book I'm working on too, like structure plays a big role, or like the calendar of the week of the events in Kismet taking place over 1 week almost worked as like a character in its own, and in terms of writing. And I'm a big outliner. I think that comes from my film background too. Like before a TV pilot, you can go to pilot, you have to approve an outline or feature treatments. Like it's part of that process. And so the first thing I did was make an outline, and I sort of gave myself like a trick. And by making it be a wedding on a Saturday meant inherently rehearsal dinner Friday, and I would do welcome drinks when they got there, and I'd do a volleyball game and a bonfire. And I sort of viewed it as if I was a maid of honor planning my sister's wedding in my favorite beach town, like what would the schedule look like? And we have the itinerary in the beginning of Kismet because it's like, this is what I'd make. Welcome to my sister's wedding. And I think that it helped me with the drafting because it was sort of easy to be like, all right, well, like throw these characters together. Like we have to have these like set pieces where like drama ensues. And so the volleyball game is the first time that Amy meets Emmett, this like man from the past. And it was like, of course they're going to be forced to be on the same team, or she's avoiding him, but he can't just like not participate in the wedding weeks. And so I think that came from film TV of it all, also of just that idea of like throw the characters together and really think about how the structure can work to propel the plot instead of sort of feeling like a bit more introspective or like meandering.
So the beginning of Kismet's kind of got a little tension going on. What was it like for you to craft, like what was going through your mind when you were trying to craft that tension?
Ooh, I love that. I think I was thinking about like secrets. I had read a good piece of advice, I think for books, but maybe for film too. But the idea of like giving all your characters a secret and then just figuring out when you reveal them. And so I knew I wanted Amy coming with a secret and feeling off and taking the first chapter, at least the first few pages, it was the first thing I wrote in my head. And it was like June 2020. And it was the first time we were going to Fire Island in COVID. And so it was like stressful, and we were like wearing masks, of course, on the ferry. And I had been trying to write this thriller that wasn't working for me. And I was on the ferry, and the first page sort of just like was happening in my brain. And as soon as we got to my husband's house, I was like, all right, we have to write this. Like, we'll see you guys in an hour. Like, got to get this out of me. And I think I really wanted to set it up where like things were off, and you have to like build, and then like the reveal of what's off, and then like I think that comes from, it's like all character development too, is like giving people a place to go. And so I sort of was prepared to start them in the dark and then make things a lot worse, and then only at the end kind of help them resolve it.
The overarching theme of the book is sisterhood. And with that, like, we both have a bunch of sisters.
How many sisters do you have?
I have 2 sisters and 1 brother.
Oh,
and I'm the oldest. So what was it like for you exploring the relationship of 2 sisters kind of outside of your direct perspective?
Oof, yes, I love that question too. It was fun. It was sort of challenging. I really wanted to tell a story about twins. I wanted to tell a story about quadruplets, and then I was overwhelmed by plotting 4 people. So, because I wanted them to be very fair. And so I switched them to twins. And I wanted to show sisters where it sort of was like a flash forward of my sisters and I are so close still. And I don't know that we would be in a situation like Amy and Joe, where they aren't so vocal about what's stressing them when they arrive, and they start having kept some like big secrets from each other and have sort of grown apart just in the nature of like adult schedules. And it was sort of something, especially as I was writing it in COVID, and we were at 26, I think 27 when I started writing it, and it was sort of like looking to the future and almost like a way of like a moment of catharsis for me, of like, if my sisters and I were ever in a place where something awful had happened to me and I hadn't told them, like what would have made me think like that, and what would bring me back together with them. And and so I think it was sort of an interesting exercise of that communication and just that reminder. And what I'm so proud of my sisters and I for, and I talk about this with me and Zach, my husband, also, because we've been so close. Zach and I went to high school together, and so he has known my sisters since we were in kindergarten, and then we started dating by the end of high school. And so he's been at everything with my sisters. But we laugh, like if you saw a picture of us from like childhood, but even high school, and then now, it's like we're all so different, but we've managed to stay the same in like our relationships. And I think that's just such an interesting relationship that a lot of people have. And there's all these sort of fun quotes about like meeting your sisters again in adulthood, and you can find like new points of connection. And so it's been fun to try and figure out like how we've all changed and have new jobs or new partners, and they're, my sister's fiancés and boyfriends are like all get along so well with Zach, my husband. And so it was sort of fun to think about like, what does this look like? And what might the moments look like for me and my sisters where maybe, it's not, things are harder, and how can we still come back to our sisters? And so that's like at the end, not a spoiler, but there's a moment of resolution. And Joe says, it's like we celebrate everything. Like there would never be a moment where one of my sisters wouldn't be honest about something that was hurting us, just at the detriment of someone else's joy. Like we are so used to doing everything together and have this sort of innate way to balance the spotlight on all 4 of us, and so I think that, but sometimes it's hard to remember that. And sort of, I think in Kismet with Amy and Ben, her husband, but also with Joe, there's sort of at the end of the day, I think Amy has to relearn that you can trust the relationships that you've built. And because she's built such special relationships, that they are there to catch her. And I think that's something that I always kind of overthink. And of course you're doubtful, and you sometimes, when I get stressed, I turn so inward, and I'm like, nobody will understand, nobody will be able to help me. And I think Amy learns this too, where it's like, oh no, like why, of course, like I have to have that moment of like trying easier and like letting go and giving people the opportunity to help you, and to also like prove, that they have more forgiveness than you might think you deserve. I don't know if that answers your question, but those are my thoughts.
We love thoughts. So you mentioned that you've already got your 2nd book done.
Yes.
Like, so what can you say about what it is and like your plans for that book?
So we haven't announced anything yet that I can share too much, but it's a return to Fire Island, but with different characters and a different beach town I can share. And so, yeah, what's so fun about Fire Island is that there's 17 different beach towns in there, and they all have really different personalities and different makeup. And so the 2nd book is in Ocean Beach, which is another really fun town that my friends and I went to. And it's more like mid-20s and like groups of friends renting houses for the weekend. And yeah, chaos ensues. So it's just a fun place. But yeah, I love the idea of sort of honoring all the different Fire Island towns.
Chaos ensuing is the best, though.
Exactly. We need drama.
Here for the drama. Get the popcorn. Let's go.
I'm really excited for people to read Kismet and to see, to see what Fire Island's like. It's just such a special place. And I think the characters go on just this really earnest journey, but it stays fun and hopefully escapist. And I'm really excited I can't believe it. Yeah. Even just like my finished copies came in last week and I was like, oh my God, it was like out of control. It's very surreal. I feel very fortunate and very excited.
Because this is literary hype, what books are you hyped about right now?
Oof, wow, such a fun question. My friend Kat Shook's book, If We're Being Honest, I'm obsessed with, also April 18th. It's so good. I love The Unsinkable Greta James by Jennifer E. Smith that came out last year, so it's coming out in paperback again. And then another Fire Island book. Fire Island's like really having such a fun moment. On Fire Island by Jane Rosen, who she also lives in Fire Island. And so it's another book that's set there, and it's just really beautiful about sort of like grief and loss and like the honoring this like beautiful community. There's so many. It's actually crazy. Happy Place by Emily Henry is so good. Everyone's gonna love it. You read that one yet? But
I have. It's
so
a fun
good.
one.
Yeah, it's so fun. That's when I was like grateful to have. I could read so early for work because we look for book to film, and so usually when books are sold is when I'm reading them to see if it's something that's right for us. And that was the one where I was like, ooh, requesting, like, please let me read this now. Probably not for us, but I need to read it because her books are so special. Yeah. What about you?
No one's ever turned this back on me. I just finished Christina Lauren's new book, The True Love Experiment. That needs to be made into a show like pronto.
All right.
It's
on it.
So good. And it's even about like a reality dating show. So it's
True Love Experiment
with a romance writer as the lead. Just
so good.
It's so good. It's so good. And if you read The Soulmate Equation, it's the sequel to that.
So good.
With Izzy. She's fantastic.
I can't read it.
I just read like 14 books in March. So there's a lot that needs to get written down.
I feel you. It's so hard. And it's hard to bop between, like, I read a few books a weekend for work. And the book I was reading this morning, finishing it up last night, is like dystopic. It's called Moths. It came out in the fall. And it's like Handmaid's Tale-y and a virus that only affects the men. And it's funny, like, but this is my whole brain is like bopping between that and then like books like Kismet and then like We Love a Grounded Sci-Fi, and you're like, where do I exist on the plane right now? Not sure.
It's so much fun when you have like all the stories floating around. It's like, wait, which?
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
oh yeah.
I had 2 books that I read in March, like pretty much back to back, both referenced the same book.
Wow.
Like, and it was like a weird book about like the flu of 1812, like, or 1912 or whatever it was. And it was just like, what Twilight world am I living in?
Where are we? That's the best. It's so
that's
funny.
The one that Quarantine Princess Diaries mentioned. Like,
you're like, where am I? I'll do all the time too. I bet you do this too. It's like, I can't remember if things happened to me or if I read them or if they're on TV or if they're in my dream. And so whenever I'm about to tell a story, I have to like, wait, did that happen? Or like, did I dream this? Or was this in a book that I read like a year ago and I just feel like it was part of my memory? But yeah, we're so lucky. It's like surrounded in stories all day long.
All day long, and it is the best. Look forward to hearing more from people as they start to read Kismet.
As it percolates into the world. So wild.
Thanks so much for doing this and taking the time.
Well, thank you so much. This is so much fun. Thanks
again to Becky for spending some time with me to talk about Kismet. I feel like we're best friends now. You guys got that vibe, right? Like, Becky and I are best friends. Cool, right? Cool. But anyway, if you're interested in checking out Kismet, the link to get that is down below, as well as where to find Becky on social media, so give her some love over there. And while you're down that side of the page, don't forget to like the video and subscribe, turn on your notifications if you haven't. Stick around because there is always more shenanigans coming at you from Literary Hype, and I am always pleased to get to share that with my internet friends. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.